I hated that. I hated going. I hated all of it. I didn't enjoy it. I hated it. I just wanted to stay at home. My dad didn't let me off the hook. You're going whether you like it or not. It's not a discussion. It wasn't even up for debate. It was, you're going. The end.
Habibi, before you enjoy this video, do your boy a solid. I've got a goal to hit 7,500 subscribers by the end of June. So like the video and subscribe the channel. Jazakallah khair.
A lot of you are not used to discipline. You were not raised with any type of discipline. Let me give you an example. I competed as a swimmer for a number of years between the ages of 13 to 16 or maybe 12 to 16. And if you know anything about swimming, then you know that it's one of the most grueling sports with regards to the training. From a young age, if you want your kid to become a swimmer, a professional swimmer, they start around 6 years old. From the age of around 8 or 9, that kid will have to wake up at 4 a.m. to jump in a pool at 4:30 a.m. Finish by 6:30, 7 o'clock. And then goes to school, and then comes back again in the evening and does another 2 hours in the evening. From young, they're swimming 4 hours a day. And I was on that program for the best part of 3 years or so. I hated it. I absolutely hated it. It's cold. I'm tired. I'm half asleep. Somehow I'm in my swim gear. I've got my goggles on, and I know the water's cold. Outside it's cold. It's the middle of winter. I know the water's cold because the water's always frigging cold. They make the water cold for swimmers, for competitive swimmers, because once you start swimming, you get really hot really quickly. So if the water was already warm, this could infringe on your ability to train properly. So they leave the water quite cold so that you can warm up on your own. But that first bit of getting into the water, bloody nightmare. I hated it. I absolutely hated it. Everyone hated it. But you had to do it. And my dad would not let me off the hook. He would not let me off the hook ever. I'd always have to go. It doesn't matter whether I slept well or I didn't sleep well. Before that, I had done karate from the age of, I don't remember, 7 to around 14, maybe 13. And I got my black belt as well, junior black belt at the age of 12 or 13. I hated that. I hated going. I hated all of it. I didn't enjoy it. I hated it. I just wanted to stay at home. My dad didn't let me off the hook. You're going whether you like it or not. It's not a discussion. It wasn't even up for debate. It was, you're going. The end. But what did that instill in me? It instilled in me discipline. It instilled in me the mentality that you've got to get stuff done even when you don't want to. And I have my father to thank for that. When you've got something to get done, you get it done regardless of how you're feeling. How you're feeling is irrelevant. You need to get the work done. So do it and don't complain. So the first thing is that a lot of you young men have not developed your discipline muscles. Your discipline muscles are weak. So when you go and try with your interactions with women, already you're coming across as frail and weak and fragile. She can sense tacitly from you. She can smell the weakness. She can sense it. This man's not about it. Something about him. He hasn't got that. And this is what women will say. The vibe wasn't right. She doesn't know how to explain it, but she can damn well feel it. She can sense your fragility. You're not anti-fragile. You haven't just been through stuff from a young age. You just haven't been through enough. And then they'll say, well, oh, the vibe wasn't right. But what they actually mean to say is, you're not about that life. I can't sense that from you. And as humans, we do kind of pick up on these subliminal feelings from one another, especially women. So you're just worried about, how do I fulfill my procreation problem? How do I fulfill my sexual release problem in halal? You're trying to focus on that. I need you to take a step back, okay? And I need you to focus on something smaller. And this is what you're going to focus on. In business, if you want to enter a market of some sort. You want to compete in a market, in a business that is already very competitive. The absolute worst thing you can do is release a product, is to release a product that is similar to the rest of the competition, if not the same, with a couple of tiny changes here and there, or so you think, and then hope for the best, especially when that market is competitive. The market of marriage is competitive. Hence why I'm making this comparison. That's the worst thing you can do. You're just going to get swallowed by the front runners of that market already. So what do you do? How do you make an opening for yourself? How do you make an entrance? Well, what you do is you make a completely different product that the big players have not made or are not focusing on. And you make that product that doesn't have much competition. It's a blue ocean. There's not much competition there. You make that product as best as you can, and you aim for a very specific, tiny niche. Apple, when they first started making their computers, they had a very specific target customer in mind. Geeks, nerds. Apple was notoriously difficult to use. The user interface for Apple computer was notoriously difficult to use. I didn't touch Apple for a long time because of that. But before my time, when they first started in the 70s and 80s and 90s, it was notoriously difficult to use. Windows was just so much easier. They prided themselves on that. They didn't change it for a long time. A long time. It was not even Windows compatible for ages until the late 90s, or maybe even early 2000s. That appealed to a specific audience. Who was that audience? Nerds, geeks, people who prided themselves on their ability to navigate complex computer systems. That was their audience. And then they began the tipping point. And if you've read Simon Sinek's book, The Tipping Point, he talks about this. Aiming for a tiny niche, you set that twig on fire, and then that twig will eventually set the whole forest ablaze. But you've got to find the twig. You can't try and light up the whole oak tree with a tiny little match. It's not going to work. You need to find a twig that you can light, and the twig will catch fire to the leaf, and the leaf will pass on that fire to the branch, and the branch will pass on that fire to the bark of the tree, on and on and on. Next thing you know, you've got a wildfire. Apple. What am I telling you right now? It sounds cliche, but it's absolutely pertinent. And that is, get your focus off of women. I know it's hard. I know it's easy for me to say, Mahdi, you're married. You've been married since the age of 16. You've never had to really deal with this problem. You can't relate. You're right. I can't. I accept that. I can't relate to what you are going through in the way that you are going through it. I accept that. I agree. Now what? Now what? We still have to find a solution here. You don't have any discipline muscles. Your discipline muscles are weak. And that crosses over into all facets of your life. And it crosses over in your interaction with women. You've got no confidence. There's no backbone behind you. You haven't got that sturdy backbone where you can talk to a sister. You can talk to a woman with confidence and be like, yeah, I've overcome much more difficult things than talking to a female. This is like a walk in the park. You don't have that. And she senses your weakness. She can smell it. She might not be able to explain it. She might tell you it's because you're not good looking enough. You're not tall enough. You're not fill in the blank. But then she'll go with some next guy, some next brother who's not as good looking as you, who's shorter than you. He might not even be doing as well as you professionally or whatever. And yet she still picked him. Why? Well, what's the dissonance here? What's going on? I remember when one sister I was dealing with a few years back, she said, oh, I don't want to marry a divorcee with kids. And I never want to do that. She had never been married before herself. 2 years later, she married a man who was twice divorced with 5 children from 2 baby mamas. Twice divorced with 5 children from 2 baby mamas. After this same woman said, I will never marry a man who has been divorced and has children. I just don't want that. Why? Why? How? Because he clearly portrayed something to her. He had an energy about him, which came off of the back of his accomplishments. And he is an accomplished man. You're trying to dominate the market before you've even set light to a tiny twig. And that tiny twig begins with your discipline with yourself. It begins with your discipline with yourself. How are you going to be able to overcome the, frankly speaking, quite ego-bruising rejections of women if you don't even have the discipline to, I don't know, go gym 3 times a week? Something basic, something simple. You don't have the discipline to go to your MMA club twice a week. How? Ask yourself this one question. One question, ask yourself. Aside from eating, sleeping, and breathing, what do you do consistently every single week, where there are days and times for this specific activity? Ask yourself this. Hold yourself to account right now. What do you do consistently every single week, or maybe even every single day? So much the better. But at least every single week, you've got set days for set things. What is there anything in your life right now? And don't tell me you've done it for 2 weeks. That doesn't count. 1 month, that doesn't count. Is there anything in your life that you have done consistently with discipline, performing to a high level, as meaning as best as you can? You're really truly exerting yourself for a minimum period of 12 months. Is there? I think a lot of you will find that there isn't. You haven't. So start there. Because what other choice do you have, bro? What other choice do you have? You don't have any other choice. It's either that or go down the black pill route with nihilism and woe is me and so on. You don't have a choice. You need to start building. You've heard this before. Women simply are, men must become. I'm not saying you have to become top 1% man to get a wife, and you have to become an exceptional guy so you can get a basic bushra. That's not what I'm saying. But I am saying there has to be something about you. Something, and it's something. Show me something. Show me something where I look at you and I think, you know what? That's a solid young man. That's a well put together young man.